Migration and Xenophobia. Special welcome to those who haven't been here last night. They missed something. And another special welcome to those who have been here. And I commend you for getting up with all that snow and early in November. It's great that you're all here. And I hope we will spend some fruitful hours together. I would like to present myself. My name is Barbara Müller. I'm the coordinator of the Swiss Apartheid Debt and Reparations Campaign, KEESA in German, Kampagne für Entschuldigung und Entschädigung im südlichen Afrika. And our campaign has been formed in 1998, and it was all about the unfinished business of Switzerland with the apartheid South Africa. We thought Switzerland has to deal with that past, and Switzerland also owes compensation and reparation to the people of South Africa. And it is in this context that we organize conferences to deal with the past of South Africa and to deal with our own past. This is the fourth conference that has been organized in the last 4 years. We are very happy that we have been able to find the cooperation of the Center for African Studies, who have been our partners in this for all the 4 conferences, and Africa Committee, who through their bulletin, Africa Bulletin, always make a special issue on the theme of the conference. You find this, the Africa Bulletin in the file that you have been given, and you also find information about the other cooperating organizations, namely FEPA and Solifonds. We thank the Basel Africa office who host us. We can have these wonderful rooms for free, and we feel very at home in these localities. Yesterday, Eliseo Makama led a conversation with Jean-Pierre Misado and Katharina Moravec on the issue of migration and xenophobia in Switzerland and in South Africa. And we went into depth into the issues of definitions. Is it xenophobia or is it racism? We talked about physical violence versus structural violence. We talked about intrinsic inclusion and exclusion in society, about nationalism and citizenship. And I hope that today's inputs and debates may help to get even deeper into the subject matter. And I think it has also proven to be very fruitful to compare the phenomenon in both countries, in South Africa and in Switzerland. I think it brings new ideas to both sides, how to conceptualize xenophobia and exclusion in our societies. And I think that's also one of the ideas of the conference, is to bring people together, activists and academics, who reflect on these issues and who can benefit from the exchange between themselves. Now, the panels for today are planned that we will have inputs for about 1 hour, and then there is time for about half an hour also for interaction and debate with the audience. We have 2 panels in the morning, then we break for lunch. For lunch we go together, those who want to the canteen of the Basel Theatre, where everybody pays for his or her own lunch. And then at 2 o'clock there will be the third panel, and then we will end with the concluding panel discussion with all the participants, and the conference is planned to end at 5:15. I wanted also to comment on the exhibition. The exhibition is here for this conference. It has been commissioned by PACSA. I think Mervyn will maybe say a few words afterwards to the exhibition. And I think Fastnopfer has been facilitating also the exhibition. No? Yeah, maybe toilet facilities you find over there, and we will have coffee then at the break. That's as much as I wanted to say for an introduction. And since I am also facilitating the first panel, I now continue to introduce the two presenters. The first presenter is Sindi Mkhize. She represents Abahlali Mjondolo. She may pronounce it better than me. She is a founder member of the organization. The organization understands itself as a social movement, as a movement of shack dwellers who stand up for their rights. The organization has celebrated its 10th anniversary this year, and Sindi is wearing the colors of the organization, black and red. And the first panel is meant to talk about resistance to xenophobia, to talk about solidarity networks, and to give examples of what can be done. Both will tell from their point of view what their organization is doing. Then our second presenter is Mervyn Abrahams. They are both from KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal is also the province where the xenophobic attacks in April started. And I think even in Pietermaritzburg, where Mervyn comes from. Mervyn is the director of an organization called PACSA. PACSA stands for Pietermaritzburg Agency for Community Social Action. It's an organization that has been there for a long time. I remember that we knew about PACSA already during the anti-apartheid struggle, and it's one of the organizations that managed to continue to stand up for social action, for social justice, and we will hear from Mervyn what exactly they are doing. And now I hand over to them.
Good morning. I'm not so sure about this microphone. It's quite a complex piece of
delicate.
And it's really good to be here with you this morning. Sindi and I had decided that in order to connect again with the discussion, as Barbara said, we had last night, we would just like to show you two cartoons that appeared in the prominent newspapers in South Africa. And I think it sets the tone for how we viewed, at least through the eyes of the media and the cartoonist, the phenomenon of xenophobia and what was happening. And I think the one cartoon was spread around quite internationally. And that's the first cartoon done by a cartoonist in Cape Town of the name of Reynolds. And I'm not sure if you can see it as well, but I will explain it a little. It's the migrant's compass. And if you're in Central Africa, caught up in a context of war, context of massive deprivation, and you wish to flee to live, you really have to make your decisions. Because if you go north towards the Mediterranean, the likelihood is shipwreck and death. If you go west, you are confronted with Boko Haram, which some of us will know about, terrorist violence in West Africa. If you go east in Africa, you find Al-Shabaab, which is also a very violent organization and the cause of many deaths in Kenya and in other countries. And if you come south toward the direction of South Africa, you're likely to find yourself in the midst of xenophobic violence. So what do you do if you're caught up in a conflict of war? The second cartoon is a depiction of what happened in April. The violence is traced back, in terms of timeline, to a speech made by the Zulu king using the imagination of the other. As we heard last night, the other is to blame for our problems. And that narrative was supported by the son of the president, who agreed with it. And so this wave of xenophobic violence was engineered almost by very high-powered people who had particular interests in mind. And the response of the South African state to this wave of terror is to throw a little glass of water. And so it explores the dynamic of how is the state engaging with this reality or not engaging with this reality. And that the particular interests that often drive xenophobic violence is much stronger than the response of the South African state to the xenophobic violence. So those are just two cartoons, just to give some background to our discussion this morning. I don't know how I put this off. Close it.
Barbara introduced us, and I'll again introduce myself. My name is Sindi Mkhize. I'm from the organization called Abahlali Mjondolo Movement of South Africa. It means Shack Dwellers Movement. It's called Abahlali Mjondolo Movement of South Africa. I would likely give a small briefing of our movement. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Center of the African Studies and all the organizers of this seminar on xenophobia. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank the movement that entrusted me to to take the responsibility to speak on this seminar. It is important for me to share that our movement has been celebrating 10 years on the 3rd of October this year. As we all know that the social movement or civil organization doesn't last longer because of the political influence. But we managed to walk a long walk up to 10 years in October this year on the 3rd. Obviously, people would like to know how did the movement started? How did we find ourselves to begin and start this organization called Abahlali Mjondolo? And this movement was began in March 2005. And in our movement, none of us knew that the movement is going to become such a big movement in South Africa. Abahlali was formed to fight and protect the dignity of the shop dwellers and the poor people in South Africa. As we know that the poor people in South Africa doesn't have voice, then we stand up and took this and said that we're going to stand up and speak for the people, poor people in South Africa. And we'll stand up and fight for the dignity of the poor people in South Africa. We began by the road blockade like other social movements around the world. When you start this thing, organizing the people, then you first go in the road and block the road, and then boom, something happened over there. There is a big settlement in Durban that called Kennedy Road Informal Settlement. The Kennedy Road Informal Settlement blocked the big road that called M19 in Durban, and it's a busy road. The reason for blocking this road, there was a piece of land nearby the settlement that we promised to the people to be, that the state promised the people to house them, but those promises were not fulfilled, and they decided to give that plot of land to the businessmen to build something to the blocks or something, the bricks for selling and to make profit. Then the people get angry and decide that no, we'll be stupid if we can just sit down and not do something about what government has been promised us and now it's not fulfilling the promises. Obvious, that's how the movement started. And of course, we are living in the shack, and it's not a nice thing to live in a shack. The people who haven't been in the shack, their life is very difficult in the shack. You'll find there will be hardly no electricity, there is no water sanitation, they don't collect the refusal. You'll find the streets are dirty, and those shacks are leaking. The situation there is not good at all. As the movement struggling, while we're struggling, we are not just struggling for the housing in our city. We also take very serious that the human beings are doing anything. Before they can do anything, they take our lives and careers first. We take our lives and careers as a priority before we do anything. But also we know that shop dwellers and the poor people do not count in our society. We are treated like the children, and some people like that don't have brains. Sometimes they say, no, leave those people, they belong in the shacks, you know, they don't treat us serious people, that they have brains. We also know that the government also doesn't care about us. That is why we become the social movement. It's because of the government. It's not taking the stand and recognize us as the poor people in South Africa. We have had no choice to organize ourselves as the shop dwellers. We have to build a strong movement that has become a voice and our shield. For us to protect, we have to build this movement and make it as a shield for us to protect our lives within the government. We have had no choice to occupy the lands in our cities. We have no right to the cities in South Africa, but we forced to occupy the lands in the cities. we have had to connect ourselves with the basic services. The government doesn't provide the basic services in the shacks. We have to connect ourselves with lights, water, and obviously we have to build our own crashes and build our gardening, and we have to look our sick people and orphans. There is no roads in between the shacks, of which it makes very hard for the ambulances to go inside the shacks and look after the people that are sick inside the shacks. And for the police, it is very difficult for them to to go inside the shacks and deal with the criminals and deal with these people that are condemning xenophobic attacks in the shacks. Our movement have always began to have made it very clear that Abahlali is not just about the issue of service delivery. Abahlali have a vision to build an equal and a just society where every human being is given an equal opportunity and treated with respect and dignity. Yes, of course, we have just made it very clear that there is no human borders. If you are in South Africa, you cannot treat someone that is born outside South Africa, because you will not know what is going to happen to you when you're going outside South Africa. Then that is why we said there is no human borders, which we call it Unyawo Alunampumulo in Zulu name. We have made it very clear that the person is always a person whenever they find themselves. If you are in South Africa and you're born in Africa, you are the South African citizen. You cannot be getting discriminated of being not having the citizenship in South Africa. I don't know if this mic is working. Okay. So it is one of the reasons why the movement began a campaign to protect the people born from other countries. In 2008, we were able to develop some early signs and started organizing the meetings in the settlements and settlements to condemn xenophobic violence that spread in our cities. We had also asked the members to be in the lookout and act swiftly and where there were signs of violence against our brothers and sisters born in other countries. In 2015, this year, in April, when the violence of xenophobia erupted, we began to call and calm and protect of the right of the immigrants. We started identifying areas of hotspots and organized meetings to talk to our members about the importance of the human life in respective of where person was born. We organized a peaceful solidarity march together with the Congolese, which is going to show now how we organized it and how it was turned down by the government officials, police and the taxi drivers, the people that are drug addicts in Durban. I'm going to show that short video on YouTube that's going to show what happened there when we organized the march together with the xenophobia. We started, the Congolese. We organized the peaceful solidarity march together with the Congolese Solidarity Campaign in Durban. That march was violently attacked by the police and some drug addicts and people in the taxi ranks. We risked our lives during this time. We received a death threat as we were accused of supporting the foreigners to march in the foreign country in South Africa. People lost their lives, including being burnt in life. In solidarity with migrants, we held meetings in the township and shack settlement where more violence took place. We helped fetch their kids who were also held hostage at schools. We visited and gave hope to those who were placed in the refugees camp in Sipingo. There was a refugee camp that was in Sipingo. That was the biggest one that all these people were kept safe there, and we went and visited them to give them the support so that we are with them. We are trying to calm the people in the areas. We hope that they will come back and live together with those people, you know. So people lost their things, their belongings. Of course, the children that were in school, they were traumatized because they have to leave the schools and go to live that in the refugees camp in Isipingo. And we know if you taking children, women, and the men living together in one place, it's not good for the kids. The kids are starting asking questions: why we here? Why we being treated like this? And the parents have to give answers to those kids. And of course, they won't give answers if the people in South Africa are not supporting, showing those kids that they are there to support them and getting the way of them to get out from the refugees camp and go back to their normal places. While we have this, we always, when we have this supporting these people, and you cannot control the people's anger. You can go there and support, but the people still continue and do these things. But we also strongly believe that the state has not just done nothing to protect lives, but actually support these attacks behind the scene. We also know that the ruling party and the political leaders in general did not act honestly in this situation. To support the people from outside from South Africa. We've seen that cartoon Mervyn shown us that the government, the state, is the main people that are condemning this behind the scene. They're pushing the people in front so that they can be seen as the people that are innocent. So we thought we will continue to work closely with the migrant co-organization and continue to do awareness campaigns among the members and the community in general. In general, that their enemies are not the neighbors, they are neighbors. So we're going to try to make people in South Africa to understand that the people from Africa are not their enemies. They are also the human beings. They also have the human life like us. Obvious, we know that there are people that they're not going to take that. They are the people that they keep on doing the thing of this attack. We are convinced that if we continue to support the people from outside the South Africa, we will not get the support from the government. We will remain in shocks. So they're trying to push us to stop supporting the people outside the South Africa. We must be against the xenophobia, and obvious we'll live in shocks for life if we keep on supporting the people in South Africa that are not from South Africa, South Africans. Because they've got this belief that the people from outside are the ones that coming and getting the housing. They are the ones that they taking our jobs. They are the ones that they are the ones that are coming here and living in South Africa with no permits. So it's not about what they in South Africa for. They because of the reasons. They came from their countries to South Africa because of some different reasons, of which we can also go outside to their countries because of the reason that we are living at in South Africa. Just now I'm going to show you some small YouTube videos of how the movement is organizing themselves with the marches, and how did we support the immigrants while they were doing march in Durban, the Congolese, in solidarity with the Congolese in Durban. I don't know if it will be okay for me to do that. Okay. The first video is going to be It's going to be about the people, the shacks in Durban. I don't know the volume of the...
Unfortunately, the cable is too short to
Okay.
maybe help ourselves like this.
Okay. This is how we organized ourselves in the shacks. Obviously, you can see the shacks, how these are the people that were marching, organizing, fight against Okay, it's just a short video. I will go back and do it again. It seems like it stopped. You can just see the shacks, how big is the shack. This is the biggest shack in KwaZulu-Natal. This is where the movement started to begin. It's called Kennedy Road Informal Settlement. Okay, I'm going to show the second video. This is the march we had with the Congolese in solidarity with the Xenophobia. You can see in the front is the Abahlali of Mjondolo that Okay, we had also had the meetings with these Congolese people in one of the shack settlements in Sianda, in Durban also.
Ces jours-là, j'étais photographe. J'ai participé au fait, mais exceptionnellement. Mon ami Pascal, Alex, Robert, le notre locataire, Papa Raphaël, Papa Mkhize, Jackie et autres invités du côté Abahlali à l'ordonnance de l'inspecteur pour ce pays.
I don't know if I can stop it there because that whole issue was about the march that we had. Okay, if you look at that march, the march was not successful because on the way, the march was attacked by the police, the taxi associations, and obviously the people that are street traders. They were blaming us for supporting the people. The police were stating it clear that we mustn't support these people. The people must go. That was the word from the police saying it to us, why we're supporting them. All of a sudden, a week later, the state organized the march. That was, they were trying to show us that their march is going to be successful than the Abahlali march that was organized with the Congolese. Their march turned to war because there were two marches in the same time. One was against xenophobia, one was saying the people must go. It ended up not giving the message of what they were trying to do because seems like they are against the xenophobia, although they were the one that they condemning the xenophobic attack. The Congolese, obviously, they tend to say, no, we cannot allow people march on behalf of us without us. Because the Congolese were not invited in that march. Instead, the municipality and the people, ANC, the ruling party people, they organized that march against, without getting the Congolese and the people, the refugees involved. And the refugees started to organize their march on the other side, saying that no, we cannot allow you people march without us. And their march was also not successful. They didn't continue because of the war between these two parties. So it is obvious that the government is the one who's condemning these attacks. Although the government seems like he's innocent, he is the big person who's behind and pushing the people in front of saying that you people must say this and that and that. If government can provide the services to the people, you will not find the people in these situations of doing attacking the African against African. It's because of the lack of service delivery to the government. The government provides, then everyone have everything, then you will not see these attacks all over the country.
Thank you. We will then have questions and debate after the second input together. So please, Mervyn.
So thank you, and it's good to be here again. Perhaps I'll get this thing working with time. Okay. As Barbara said, I work for an organization called the Pietermaritzburg Agency for Community Social Action. PACSA was started way back in 1979, first as an anti-apartheid organization and to work around creating awareness, particularly within the white Christian community, around the effects and the impacts of apartheid on black South Africa. And so in the post-apartheid period, it is not a surprise that PACSA as an organization focusing on social justice would immediately react to the xenophobic violence we saw in the country 2008. We saw it again this year, but as Jean-Paul mentioned so clearly last night, we see the sporadic outbursts, but the reality of xenophobia and the reality of racism continues in our South African society since colonial times. And so the task of continuing to work to eradicate racism and xenophobia is a long-term process, and would have to be dealt with in various ways. How we in PACSA is dealing with it is that we have gone back to what is the basic principle? What is the basic principle that we, even way back in the 1950s, in the midst of apartheid, had articulated and had imagined for our political society? And that is captured in a document called the Freedom Charter. And the opening words of the Freedom Charter reads, "South Africa belongs to all who live in it." South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And it is that belief that has helped us overcome apartheid, and is that same belief that will have to guide us in overcoming a form of nationalism and what we in PACSA believes has been a national imagination post-1994, which, as we heard last night, is premised on the basis of exclusion. Because it is premised on the basis of national boundaries. And so we have to begin to ask ourselves, and we don't have the answer. We don't have the answer as to exactly what that would be. But we believe that it is our task to begin that imagination. Secondly, the principle of human dignity. We were really aghast at the state's argument for why there should not be xenophobia. So Zuma and other state ministers came out and said, well, no, you should not attack people from other parts of Africa who's now living in South Africa. Why not? Because during the struggle years, they gave us a home. And immediately, some of us thought, well, it was the elite part of the liberation movement that found a home in Zambia and in Tanzania and in Swaziland and in Botswana and in Zimbabwe. It was not necessarily an experience of everyone. But even if that is the case, and perhaps we should welcome people back, we in PACSA do not believe that that is the basis for welcoming. The basis for welcoming any person has to be at the level of dignity. Human dignity. Every person is, and I was hoping that I would have that photograph. Claudia and I from Fasnoff traveled through South Africa and visited a number of people about 2 weeks ago, and I saw this photograph in an office in Pretoria, and it said, "We are all strangers somewhere." We're all strangers somewhere. And I really wanted that photograph to show you, but I didn't get it. And so for us in PACSA, those are the two principles that has guided our interventions. And let me say, as Sindi has said, our interventions are small in the scale of the violence. And so one might say, well, what did we do? And I think that is part of our discussion this morning in terms of networks of solidarity. I think for us the first manner of response has to be to create safe spaces of welcome for people who are caught up in the traumatic experience of violence. And in our response of creating safe spaces, and perhaps later I'll show you a photograph of what we did, A number of organizations in Pietermaritzburg came together, faith-based organizations, NGOs, and trade unions. And so we tried to build a coalition. And what we did was in collaboration with representatives of the immigrant community, to tie yellow ribbons round all the trees, from street to street to street. Pietermaritzburg is a beautiful city, the inner part of the city, because we have very many trees lining the streets. And so we utilize those trees, and some horticulturists will tell us that we did something wrong, and perhaps we did by tying bows around trees. But it was a response to immediately identify and to create safe spaces of safety to where people could come. And why did we do it in collaboration with Somalians and with Congolese? We did it because we believe that the first principle of dignity, or the living out of dignity, has to involve participation. And has to say to the person who is the victim that you are part of the solution, rather than adopting a position, we will do that for you. And so it is a process of integration, because in a context of violence, the victim and the perpetrator of violence are not equal in terms of power dynamic. The dynamic of power is unequal in that relationship. And so, if we are to create spaces of safety, and if we are to say that South Africa belongs to all, and that some people are being chased out of our context because of xenophobia or racism, they have to become part of providing the space of safety. And in that process of articulating and participating in deciding how that safety should be, they are empowered. And so the power imbalance is beginning to shift. So for us, that was the first step. The first step was to create places of safety and to ensure that the basic necessities of human life is made available to people. And in that, we were lucky to have the collaboration of the municipality. The mayor is an old activist of the past. He always reminds me in public that when he was arrested in the apartheid times, the first and the only thing he did was to let somebody know, go to PACSA, to let PACSA know that he's been arrested. Because people in Frankfurt and people in Lucerne will know the next day that Yusuf Bamji has been arrested. And this is his way of paying back. So the political forces are also different depending on where you are located. So that was the first step. To move it to the second step of our response of solidarity is to say, what are the causes of the xenophobic violence as experienced in our city? And we discussed it at great length yesterday, that the space of the violence, the geographical space where the violence erupts, is precisely in the communities that are least resourced. And the communities that are suffering, whether you're local or whether you're immigrant, you are suffering the violence of poverty. And that poverty in itself is violence. It is violence against the poor, whether the poor are local, were born in that area, or whether the person has come from elsewhere. Poverty is violence. And I think for us that is a very important statement. It is always violence. And so how do we deal with the violence of poverty in those spaces? And it is in that context that PACSA is engaged in what we call research around affordability, a research around the persistent nature of poverty, and research around the South African economy that continues to be structured in an extractive manner and continues to produce and reproduce poverty. And so we do not believe for 1 minute that xenophobia can only be seen as a moral issue or an issue of perception. It is also grounded in the reality of the South African economy, which continues on the same trajectory as colonial and apartheid times. There has been no significant transformation of the South African economy. And as long as that is not transformed, we will continue to see sporadic violence because it gives the groundwork for the us and them narrative to emerge. And so a lot of our work has been around advocacy attempts. The Premier of the province of KwaZulu-Natal had instituted very late, of course when everything had quietened down, a commission of inquiry into the root causes of xenophobia. And we saw that as a space where PACSA should engage on the basis of our research and arguing for a reformulation of our economy and the spaces of poverty. The third area of solidarity is that PACSA, we believe that in this task of reimagining our political space, we have to use the arts, the visual arts, theatre. And so the exhibition is one example of that work. Cartoons is another example of that work. And as part of that, we also have a film and arts festival every year. And so our Film and Arts Festival this year was under the title, Imagine We All Belong Here. Can we begin to imagine what it means to belong? And to belong is more than just living. It's more than just being present in a space. It is to participate in creating that space. It is to participate in terms of rights and responsibilities. And so we invited all the immigrant communities. We had, you know, sometimes we say, thou shalt not. And of course, at the beginning, creating spaces, we said to South Africans, thou shalt not act with violence. But it's also important to say, can we begin to enter into the world of another person? And so the Film and Arts Festival became a space of entering into the world of the other through means of cooking. So food festivals. Through means of dress, dressing up in our garbs and so on. Through means of showing films of life in other parts of Africa and in South Africa. Through means of dialogues and round-table discussions about exploring the dynamic of what it means. all in a space to explore with the immigrant communities on what belonging means in our city. And so those were direct steps of engaging in terms of xenophobia. To say in conclusion that it is precisely in the spaces of poverty, as we heard last night, resources and so on, gathered with a South African reality, which perhaps we didn't explore last night so much, but with references made to it, of a post-traumatic society, a society of violence, having come through the violence of apartheid and the violence that led to the end of apartheid. Our first reaction is violence. And also in terms of that violence, a form of masculinity and gender, which says, I am a man, and whatever genderized idea around masculinity I have. And so when you hear statements as I heard on the streets, the foreigners are taking our women. They are taking our jobs. And that emasculates me as a man in my own home, because I cannot provide. It's changing that narrative to a narrative that says our economy has failed us. The lack of transformation has meant that we all find ourselves in this space, immigrant and South African. And together, all who live in this land will have to imagine and reimagine a new political economy in which xenophobia and racism will no longer exist. And that we see as our task. Thank you.
Did you want to show?
Oh, it's just a photograph. Sorry, I'm not very... I come from an organization that focuses a lot on the arts and so on, and we really believe that and yet I am not necessarily the best. It's not very... This cartoon that Brandon did, Brandon, the cartoonist, does cartoons for very many South African newspapers, and so it's syndicated across the country, but also some of his cartoons has been picked up internationally and was published in is it Le Figaro in Paris, and so on. And this emerged after a conversation we had with him around, this is Africa, but it is also South Africa. We are adrift, and people are falling off all the time, which is the structural nature of poverty, into the sea of nothingness. So for us, that was really an important one. This is just what we did, and some people who work with trees will tell us that it's perhaps not a good thing because the tree wasn't breathing properly through the bark. At that moment, it was human beings that were important to us. And the message And so we did, I mean, throughout, we tried to do the entire city in terms of yellow. Yellow because it's a color of welcome and of joy. We know in different cultures, colors mean different things, but for us that is what yellow meant. We gathered a coalition of organizations together under the slogan, Pietermaritzburg says no to xenophobia. So that's what it means. It's not written so nicely. When you saw it, it's clearer. This is just a thingy of the street, one of the streets. You can see it going down. And the great thing of it was that because we are a university city, we have lots of young people from all around the world. And in South Africa, which is not just xenophobic, but is intermixed with racism, in which if you come from Europe or you come from the United States, you're different, you're part of the us. You're not part of the other. And so we had young people from the US and young people from European countries, but we also had Somalians and Congolese and so on. And together we draped the trees. And of course everywhere we had this statement from the Freedom Charter, going back to the origin of our non-racial, non-sexist imagination document that South Africa belongs to all who live in it.
Now the floor is yours.
Mr.
Questions? Maybe I have a question to you, Mervyn. All these activities that you undertook, what was the response? Did you also get death threats, or how was the response you got?
The response we got was by and large positive. In the sense, in our roundtable discussions, in our Film and Arts Festival, South Africans were saying, yes, we oppose xenophobia. What is extremely interesting in that respect was that the spaces we were creating were within the city centre. So it was a different space from the location of the space in the township. But we had to do it because people were fearing for their lives. And so we had to bring people from out of their spaces into the city, just from a purely safety point of view and security point of view. And when people leave their space, they tend to engage differently. And that just confirmed for us once again that it is the space of poverty that initiates it. So that was one level of response. The other level of response from the part of particular interest groups was exactly as you were saying. So for instance, the small traders who operate within the township areas were very, they didn't give us death threats, direct death threats. I didn't receive direct death threats, but it was that we do not approve of what you were doing. And so it was clearly particular interests that were driving these, and any stance against xenophobia acts against the interest of the small traders, as we spoke about yesterday, taxi owners and operators, and so on. Some government responses. So we had the mayor, Yusuf, but it's largely because of prior connections. But some of the municipal officials wouldn't join in. You know? So there is this constant play around the constituency that Jean-Pierre was speaking about yesterday. You know, if your constituents are for that, then you side with them. So it's a very dual response thing in our experience. Yeah. But it also, sorry, the last thing I want to say is, it also, for us, what was important was that organizations that has some level of credibility within the city, either because of your history or because of your integrity, being seen to be standing in solidarity with, helps to protect in terms of security. So that for us was actually
in your, is it working?
Now, yes. In each of your cases, have there been attempts to get into a dialogue with the taxi driver associations, with small traders associations, with those groups who were not directly responsible, perhaps, but rather sympathetic towards the violence? Is there any means of finding a common ground in the dialogue about social justice? Or are these two completely separate camps?
Yes, we are. I mean, part of our roundtable discussions and dialogues is precisely to bring these two together. What we have found as a way into the debate is a project which we started in the midst of the xenophobia called Racism in the Streets of Pietermaritzburg. And it was strategic to start at racism and to move from racism towards xenophobia. Because in our analysis, xenophobia is also a form of racism. And because the very actors of xenophobic violence will identify with racism as being recipients or others are being racist to them. And so we have, and unfortunately I think if we have the address list, I would like to, I rushed off without bringing it, but we've got the first product of that in a 20-minute DVD, which was discussed with 60 participants afterwards, which we could make available around racism on the streets of Pietermaritzburg, to explore how, by and large, poor black people are still at the receiving end of racist, institutionalized racist things. And so that becomes an entry point for the taxi drivers. And they'll all say, yes, 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 yes. And then to steer the conversation as we did in that, to saying, well, what are we doing in response to the immigrant community who lives in our... And that's when suddenly the penny begins to drop, that we cannot resolve our situation or racism in the South African context, or racism as experienced by South Africans in isolation from talking about xenophobia, because we all inhabit the same space, and it is in that space. And I must say that those who have come to our dialogues are beginning to see that. I think it will take a long-term process, at least for us, it's going to be a few years process.
Okay, adding on what Mervyn Evans said, obvious in Durban, We are engaging the taxi owners and the taxi associations to be a part of fighting with xenophobia, since we know that they are also violent. The taxi associations are also violent. But there is a form where we are working together, because the taxi associations are also the victims of the states. Because when their taxis are getting impounded, they don't have jobs. They sit at homes. Of course, the passengers doesn't have a transport that's going to take them to work, and you know they're suffering because they're not getting anything at the end of the day. There was a strike that they had. They hold about 2 weeks in Durban, the taxi associations, where we find ourselves that we are not going anywhere. We've been stuck in the houses. If you don't have your own transport, you're depending in those public transit, those taxis, and you're far away from the trains, and you don't have bus in your communities. Then you're only depending on the taxis. We find ourselves getting involved in those taxi associations, doing the roundtables, trying to find the way or the solution of how the municipality can get those taxis out on the place for them to work. That was the good start to work together with them and showing them that we are not only supporting the people that are outside the South Africa. We are also supporting you people to do your jobs, to get something at the end of the day. So we can work together by fighting whatever that government is trying to form, whatever the discrimination or that kind of xenophobic that government is trying to form in our country. That was the beginning of our movement getting involved by issuing the statements and showing the government that we are in solidarity with the taxi owners and with the taxi associations.
So can I just say one other space that is really an important one for this dialogue is the context of faith communities. In South Africa, of course, the faith plays a major role in the lives of most people. And so organizing faith communities, churches, but also other faiths, in terms of religious dialogue, has also been a very productive space. And other things, like for instance, working with the churches to organize just last week, there was a big soccer tournament. You know? And so instead of having teams, one South African team, a team constituting different people from different origins. And so to try and gain that and to get religious leaders to speak also is quite powerful.
More questions?
In a way, you both blame the government, or say the government is not delivering. And next to the faith communities, are there also political parties you trust more or less? Would you trust? Are political parties involved in fighting xenophobia?
And have a second question here.
Okay, my question is for the lady. I'm unsure how to pronounce your name, so I won't. You mentioned in your talk, which is very interesting, that some of the protests and some of the marches weren't successful. What do you consider to be successful in that context?
Okay, when I said our marches are not successful, in South Africa, to march, first of all, to organize the march, you have to get the permit from the state. it is difficult for us to get the permit as a social worker. We have to go miles, going to this part to this part to get the permit. If you got a permit, it doesn't mean that you still gonna go much. Your march is gonna be successful, or you're not gonna get any attack because you've got the permit. The reason why I'm saying they were not successful, I didn't have that part of the police attacking that march by shooting the people and with the water cannons, tanks, and rubber bullets, and obviously tear gas, which was which is normal in South Africa. When we march in South Africa, we never get up to where we're going to hand over our memorandum without getting all those rubber bullets and tear gases. We have to go through that attacks before we go successful and hand over the memorandum. None of our marches will go say, no, we didn't have any difficulties to organize march, and it was successful from the beginning up to the end. I don't know if your question has been answered.
Even if you have a permission?
Even if we have the permit, even if we had the permit, it's never been as successful because we are getting undermined. Who the hell are you all? You're gonna march. You know, because our voice mustn't be heard by the society or mustn't be heard by the nation.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, if I could just say, I mean, the role that the police plays in political processes, particularly around protest, is a very dubious thing, in the sense that somebody said recently that in South Africa now we negotiate through the police with the politicians, because the police are more and more seeing their role as protecting the political establishment. Which connects me to the question around political parties. Our analysis has led us to say that the political party space is not a conducive space for us to engage in with regard to questions of racism and xenophobia. Because most of the political party, whether they're right across the spectrum, somehow are run by certain kind of interests. And so when you look at, for instance, the city of Cape Town, that is governed by a different political party to the rest of South Africa, the experience of people living in spaces of poverty is the same, effectively, as elsewhere. So to use one political party in order to strengthen one's case is often not the... We didn't find that to be of value, because really, for us, part of the problem is that how political parties are constituted is part of the problem in South Africa. And that political parties are the centers of power rather than a devolved sense of power or participatory decision-making processes. So we didn't, you know, so I mean, there would be, so for instance, the economic freedom fighters, as you know, would come out and say, you know, we're opposed to this, you know, it's all about the poor, and so on, and so on, and so on. Do we trust them? Do we trust them? Do we trust that they would do anything different? Were they in power? I personally don't trust that they would do anything different. So we've skirted clear from political parties.
Okay, with us, Abahlali, we don't believe in political parties. The reason why we don't believe in political parties, what we are today is done by the political party, which is the ruling party in South Africa. So by trusting another political party, it's not going to make any change in our lives. So that is why we decided and we said no. There is one stage that we have this said no house, no land, no dignity, no vote. So why we continue voting if we are still living in shacks? Why we continue voting if the government is not taking any notice about us? We find ourselves being strangers in our hometown. Then there's no need for us to vote. Then we find ourselves getting involved in one of the political party because that was a strategy to turn down the power of the ANC in our city, where we partner with the Democratic Alliance, the Democratic Party, which is DA, Democratic Alliance, and we voted with the Democratic Alliance because we wanted to turn down the power of the ANC, which is the ruling party in our city, of which they are the people that are keeping us in these poor places where we are. So by voting the Democratic Alliance, seems like we also did the same thing that we, going back when we're saying that no land, no house, no vote. Because nothing has been changed, even if we partner with them and vote with them. There's nothing changed. Now we're going back to the stand and say no. Nothing is making us better. So for the next election, you'll find Abahlali going back to saying no house, no land, no dignity, no vote.
Thank you. I think we have come to the point where we are going to have a break. They are both here. If there are questions, you can talk to them. And we come back at 11.